The seventh generation of consoles, comprised of the Xbox 360, PlayStation 3 and Wii, is the best, the tippity top, and in this video I'm going to explain why. And before anybody comes at me in the comments arguing that you just prefer the one you grew up with, it saddens me to say that I was already 17 when it began, with the 4th, 5th and 6th responsible for my fondest childhood memories. When it comes to those earlier generations, there can be no denying that the transition from the 4th's beautiful but mostly flat 16-bit visuals to the jaw-dropping 3D spectaculars of the 5th was perhaps the biggest graphical uplift we'll ever witness. I mean, come on, it's an entire extra dimension. Until full-body VR with accompanying neural interface becomes a reality so that From Software's bosses are finally able to slap the daylights out of me in real life, I just can't see it being beaten. A strong case can also be made for the jump between 5th and 6th being the next biggest. Just look at tactical espionage darling Solid Snake. During his PlayStation debut, he's a blocky little monster, compared to Metal Gear Solid 2 on PlayStation 2, where he has a proper face and looks like a real person compared to his square-headed, barely human counterpart. The 7th generation definitely gives the semi-realistic 6th a run for its money though. The Wii we can put to one side, as while it definitely filled a certain niche, one I'll get to shortly, graphics weren't its strength. Conversely, the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 were responsible for ushering in the HD era, and while not as impressive as the leap from 2D to 3D especially, the arrival of high-definition gaming was pretty blooming special too. I still remember my first experience of it. A mate chucked on Xbox 360 launch title Call of Duty 2 on his family's new high-definition flat-screen TV, the first of its kind I'd ever seen in someone's home, and it became immediately apparent that the graphical fidelity on offer was a massive step up. Sure, most games ran well below full 1080p and sometimes struggled to even maintain consistent frame rates, but let's not all act like we weren't suitably impressed by the silky smooth images of Chris Redfield's bulging man tits being beamed directly into our living rooms. Early 7th gen titles like the astonishing Gears of War showed glimpses of what was to come, and it only got better from there. Mid-genners like BioShock and its incredibly watery water, along with Resident Evil 5 and its hyper-realistic boulder punching, raised the bar even higher, their visuals eclipsing developers' early efforts.
Pestilence wherever, everywhere, nothing but loathsome humans.
Finally, towards the end, came games that squeezed every last drop of power out of the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3, like the frighteningly beautiful Last of Us, the last hurrah that was Grand Theft Auto 5, and the much maligned but graphically outstanding Halo 4. There were some issues, the biggest being the horrible piss filter that gave so many games a queasy yellow glow, but they were but a drop in the toilet compared to the generation's consistent graphical advances. As mentioned, arguments could be made for the upgrade from 4th to 5th and 5th to 6th generations being more impressive, but no matter which you believe more impactful, it's not unreasonable to claim that the 6th to 7th and the beginning of the HD era was the last great jump, with everything since feeling incremental in comparison. The arrival of the 7th gen was the last occasion I was truly wowed by what new consoles could do, and the way things are going, I don't expect that feeling to be replicated for a very, very long time. In addition to how gosh darn gorgeous games looked, there were plenty of them too. I could talk for hours about the frankly ridiculous amount of amazing AAA blockbusters that came out every year, but that would be bland and it would be uninteresting, so I'll keep it brief. The middle of 2007 through to its end is a great example of how good we had it and one of my favourite flurries of high quality releases. In quick succession we got BioShock, Metroid Prime 3, Halo 3, The Orange Box, Call of Duty 4, Modern Warfare, Assassin's Creed, Uncharted, Drake's Fortune, and Mass Effect, to name but a few.
Shepard! No, don't touch it! Too dangerous!
Even as a university student and full-time poop soccer who chose to game all day rather than study or attend lectures, I had nowhere near enough time to play every heavy hitter, let alone the many smaller titles which punctuated them. It was glorious. I didn't just choose that particular 6-month stint because of its quality either, but also because it highlights 3 important things. 1. While AAA budgets were increasing rapidly, they hadn't become quite the money pit they are at present, which meant developers were more willing to create new franchises than they are now. 2. Nearly all the series mentioned had multiple sequels during this single generation. We got 4 Halos, 3 Bioshocks, 3 Uncharted's and 3 Mass Effects, and 1,000,001 Call of Duties and Assassin's Creeds. Outside of 2007, we also got 2 Grand Theft Autos, and 12 years later we still haven't had another. Nowadays, getting a couple of mainline games in a franchise in a single generation is pretty good going. 3. The Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 came closer to achieving parity with PC than any had before, which meant franchises that were once only available on computer began to make their way to consoles, like the Orange Box, for example. Amongst all of this, we also mustn't forget about the AA space, titles which still had decent production values but were made on a lesser budget than most of the games spoken about so far. Valkyria Chronicles is a personal favourite of mine that I still revisit to this day, as is Demon's Souls, and before you say anything else, Miyazaki's masterpiece is absolutely a AA title. It's weird, it's experimental, and it was made by a smaller team working with what was likely a much smaller budget than AAA developers had at their disposal. Heck, even North American publisher Atlus only expected it to sell 75,000 copies in North America. Even Demon's Souls' budget looked big when compared to another type of video game though, indies. The rise of the indie scene on consoles is one of my favourite facets of the 7th generation. Suddenly, shorter experiences created by just a handful of people, or even a single person in some cases, were easily accessible to a much wider audience than ever before. Looking back, it's genuinely remarkable how many high-quality indie releases there were from fairly early on. A favourite of mine towards the start of the 7th gen was Castle Crashers, and that acted as a gateway drug of sorts. Before I knew it, I was mainlining Trials Evolution for days on end, or going on week-long fez benders as I tried my hardest to discover its many hidden secrets. And don't even talk to me about Super Meat Boy, a game I played so much and failed so frequently at that it nearly turned me into Mental Breakdown Man. It's a scene still flourishing to this day, and it began its rise to console prominence during the 7th generation. And then of course, there was also the Wii. I was never a huge fan of Nintendo's motion-controlled mega hit myself. I've always preferred to sit on my fat ass when gaming, but the impact it had on the medium is undeniable. It had the usual array of incredibly successful franchises you'd expect, such as Mario, Mario Kart, Mario Party, Paper Mario, Mario Fighting, Smash Brothers, Zelda, Donkey Kong and the like, yet for all that, it was the console's less conventional side which shone brightest. It's easy to laugh now at how bananas some of the experiences it offered were.
Alright, bring the house down, guys.
But no matter how zany some of it was, I think it's fair to say that titles like Wii Fit, Wii Sports and even Wii Music struck a chord with a whole new audience. It was amazing how many people seemingly started gaming entirely because of Nintendo's little console that could. I remember visiting friends who had never shown a smidgen of interest in the medium and being shocked when they asked if I fancied a few frames of Wii Bowling or a quick knock-up on Wii Tennis. It legitimised our favourite hobby amongst previously uninterested groups in a way no other console has or probably ever will, with there even being many stories of elderly care home residents becoming obsessed with the console. The PlayStation made gaming feel cool thanks to icons like Lara Croft and titles like Wipeout with its techno-infused soundtrack, but the Wii made gaming feel like it was for everyone. To cut a long story short, there was just so much choice. From big budget releases and their AA brethren to Nintendo's motion-controlled madness and the many indie darlings, there was something for absolutely everyone. And there was also stiff competition. Unlike the 5th, where the Saturn and N64 lagged massively behind PlayStation in the popularity stakes, or the 6th, where PlayStation left the Xbox and GameCube in the dust, every console sold well and consequently received a huge amount of support. You could own only an Xbox 360, a PlayStation 3 or a Wii and never be short of fantastic games to play, and if you own several of them, well, you were laughing. But what about if you didn't have any friends, or if you didn't live in a care home? Not to worry, the 7th gen had you covered there too, thanks to the rise of online gaming on consoles. Now, it's important to note that online gaming wasn't an entirely new thing. I myself had begun fragging others online with the advent of Counter-Strike at the turn of the millennium on PC, and it had existed for many years prior too. I'd also dabbled in console shooting online following the release of Halo 2 on Xbox, the first truly great game of its kind. Those on PlayStation 2 had been able to do similar as well, with games like SOCOM and Final Fantasy XI proving popular if you had the additional hardware required to run them. The 7th generation, though, is when the experience became robust. More gamers than ever before had the necessary internet speed. Most 360s and every PlayStation 3 were equipped with hard drives so updates could easily be delivered, and developers had started to figure out how to make joining matches and the general online experience as seamless as possible. The online console scene exploded, with Halo 3 and Modern Warfare, and every Call of Duty which followed, honestly, being the biggest success stories. Heading out at midnight to pick up Halo 3, heading home, logging on and seeing more than 1 million people online was something magical. You could also download expansions to your favourite titles and eventually even full games, and vitally, there was far less of the aggressive monetization so prevalent nowadays. I know what you're going to say, horse armour, but in retrospect it really wasn't that bad compared to the ruthless nickel and diming nearly every publisher engages in these days. Greed existed, but it was unrefined greed, not quite the nightmarish corporatism we now have to suffer through on a near daily basis. Oh, and online multiplayer also hadn't become popular enough that local multiplayer was ignored. It still exists and will never go away in its totality, but a decade or two later it's become an afterthought, if even that. We mustn't forget either that another casualty of the rise of online gaming has been the death of the brick and mortar video game shop. It's been a slow and protracted death, but a death nonetheless, and I can't help but feel a little saddened by it. Taking a bundle of titles I'd played to death in the hope of trading them in for something new and shiny was always exciting, and I can't even begin to count the number of midnight launches I attended. Maybe I'm just a miserable old fart, but looking back at how many good times involve visiting an actual shop and comparing it to the predominantly digital ecosystem we have in the present, I can't help but shed a tear. I also feel I should clarify that I don't actually cry, I'm speaking in hyperbole, as weeping over something like that would be weird. The 7th was the last generation where the high street was really relevant, with a massive downturn ensuing after. Before rounding things out, it would be remiss of me not to mention the honking great elephant in the room either, the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3's failure rates. We've all heard 1,000,001 stories about it, and I myself went through 3 or 4 360s due to the problem. It was terrible and a huge black mark on the 7th generation. How much it sullies your opinion of it is really up to you, but if you were to mark it down due to having to constantly wrap your console in a towel to get the bastarding thing to turn on, I could hardly blame you. Taking into account everything discussed then, I think it's hard to look past the 7th generation as the best. Others might be better than it in certain categories, but to me it's the most well-rounded by far. We got a solid graphical upgrade thanks to the beginning of the HD era. Development budgets were also still just about low enough that indie AA and AAA games could be released by the bucket load, with many franchises finishing entire trilogies or more in a single generation. Online gaming became truly mainstream too. You were able to download games, patches and expansions thanks to consoles being equipped with hard drives. You could easily compete online against friends or enemies thanks to increasingly robust online infrastructures, and you could do it all without having to suffer through as much of the aggressive monetization that exists nowadays. And a wider audience was catered for too thanks to the wonderful Wii. Last but not least, brick and mortar video game stores experienced their last golden age too before the digital future became a reality. The 4th, 5th, 6th, 8th and 9th generations may be held in high regard by many, and I love them all too, but for me, there is no better than the 7th. Thanks for watching the video, boys, girls and 7th generation enthusiasts. If this video left you in 7th heaven, do consider liking, subscribing and sharing your thoughts, and hopefully we'll catch up again soon.